group of special kids are left in the care of a boy named Jake and a woman named Avocet after their caretaker is kidnapped. As Avocet devises a plan to keep the kids safe, a monster breaks into the house and kills her. Jake appears to be the only one who can see the monster, and as it prepares to attack them, he realizes that he alone stands between the kids and their deaths. A few days earlier, Jake is accompanied by a co-worker named Shelley to check on his grandfather, Abe, who is suffering from dementia. Before he gets there, Jake calls Abe to ask if he's okay, but the old man says he's about to be attacked by a monster. However, Jake ignores this and ends the call. Shortly after, he and Shelley arrive at Abe's neighborhood and almost hit a weird man walking on the road. They soon get to Abe's house, but as Jake walks in, he sees that Abe is nowhere to be found. He eventually sees a torn fence and follows the trail only to see Abe looking lifeless, with his eyes also removed. Jake immediately calls 911, but while speaking to them, Abe suddenly grabs his hand and tells him to find a postcard and head to an island, where he'll see a bird who will tell him all that he needs to know. Following this, Abe finally dies, and as Shelley arrives to meet Jake, he sees a strange creature behind her. He warns her about it, but as she turns back to shoot, she doesn't see anything. A month later, Jake starts therapy with a doctor named Golan, who is helping him overcome his fear after what he experienced. He mentions that he's still having nightmares about monsters, but Golan says his mind is just playing tricks on him based on what he has heard or seen before. Jake then mentions that Abe used to tell him stories about how he fought some monsters and also spent his childhood with some special kids in a house owned by a lady named Miss Peregrine. Even though Jake believed the story as a child, his dad, Frank, only thinks Abe made it up. Later that day, Jake gets home and finds out that his parents are throwing a surprise birthday party for him. He doesn't seem really interested, so he heads to his room. While he's in there, his aunt, Susie, brings him a present Abe was meant to give him. Jake accepts it happily, and as he opens it, he sees that it's a book with a postcard inside. The postcard is for a place called Cairnholm, and at the back, it appears to be from Miss Peregrine to Abe. Jake immediately informs his parents and therapist about it, and he also suggests going there to see if he can find Miss Peregrine's house. Even though his parents are not too sure about this, Dr. Golan encourages Frank to take his son, as it could help him get closure. Frank agrees to this, and the next day, he leaves with Jake to Cairnholm. On their way, they see a bird flying around, and Frank calls it a peregrine falcon. When they arrive on the island, they immediately find a hotel, but before they settle, Frank says he wants to head to the beach to watch the birds. Jake says he prefers to head to Miss Peregrine's home first, and Frank then pays 2 kids to take him there. After a long walk, Jake finally gets there, only to see that the building has been damaged. He looks disappointed and heads back to the hotel, where an old man tells him that Miss Peregrine's house got bombed during the war in 1943, with survivors recorded. Jake looks disappointed to hear this, but Frank says he always knew Abe's stories were fake. The next morning, Jake asks Frank if he can hang out with the boys in the area, and his dad agrees. However, as Jake leaves, he heads to Miss Peregrine's house instead. While walking around, he suddenly sees a girl named Emma and some other kids from Abe's stories. He runs out immediately, but ends up falling down and passing out outside. When he wakes up, he sees all the kids again and realizes that Abe's stories were real. Before he can ask any questions, Emma tells him to follow them into a loop because Miss Peregrine is already waiting for him. As they take him into a cave, Jake looks nervous and runs back to the hotel. However, when he enters, he doesn't recognize anyone. Before the people there get violent, one of the special kids named Millard, who is invisible, comes in and scatters the whole place so that a girl named Olive can escape with Jake. On their way to Miss Peregrine's house, Emma then tells Jake that the cave is a portal to a loop that starts before their home got bombed in 1943. Jake looks shocked because he came all the way from 2016, but after a while, he finally meets Miss Peregrine, who says she has been expecting him since she saw him on the boat with Frank. As she then takes him around, she mentions that she knows Abe is dead, because if he weren't, he'd have told her that his grandson was coming. After a while, Jake asks Miss Peregrine for the things Abe wanted her to tell him, but she says there are certain things she can't discuss yet. She then tells him that she and the kids belong to a group of people with special abilities called peculiars. She also mentions that she's a kind of peculiar called a imbrine. Even though this means she can turn into a bird, she says she can also manipulate time. She then mentions that imbrines can create a loop to preserve a particular 24 hours in history. She adds that if the loop keeps getting reset every day, they can stay there forever. Miss Peregrine then introduces Jake to all the special kids. After Miss Peregrine leaves, Emma gets Jake to tie a rope around her waist as she shows her ability to float in air. When he returns to the house, Jake meets one of the older kids named Enoch, whose ability is to create puppets. Despite how friendly Jake is, Enoch doesn't really appreciate his presence in the house. Shortly after, Jake joins the kids for dinner, and while he's eating, they ask him questions about his peculiarity, but he says he's just a normal boy. Some of the kids then tell Jake to stay with them forever, but Enoch says it can't work. He adds that Jake would eventually have to leave them like Abe. Later that night, Jake says he has to leave so that Frank doesn't get worried. Olive then tells him to at least watch the loop reset before he leaves. He finally agrees to this. And as they all head out, Jake watches as Miss Peregrine resets the loop just as a bomb is about to be dropped on the house. Before Jake leaves, he finds a letter Abe sent to Miss Peregrine, so he secretly takes it with him. As Emma then escorts him back through the cave, he asks why she can't come with him, and she says she'll age rapidly and die immediately. She also adds that staying in the same day in 1943 is the only thing that's keeping all the peculiars from aging. As Jake is about to leave, a bird lands inside the loop, and Emma says it's a Imbrine who has gotten injured. She then mentions that she has to take it back, after which Jake leaves. As he returns to 2016, he sees Frank, who says he has been worried about him. Jake then tells his dad that he lost track of time while playing with the kids in the area. However, Frank soon realizes that his son is lying, and he went to Miss Peregrine's house instead. Following this, Frank tells Jake that he won't be allowed to go anywhere alone until they leave Cairnholm. That night, before going to bed, Jake reads Abe's letter and sees that it was to warn Miss Peregrine about a man named Baron who had arrived in Blackpool. Abe sounds particularly concerned because there's a loop in Blackpool created by a Imbrine named Miss Avocet. The next morning, Frank takes Jake with him to watch the birds. When they get there, they meet a man named John, who is there with big cameras. John introduces himself to them and says he's a bird watcher who came around to get inspiration for his book. After they return to the hotel, Jake sneaks out and returns to 1943 through the cave. When he gets there, Miss Peregrine is treating the injured Imbrine, who turns out to be Miss Avocet. As Miss Peregrine mentions who Miss Avocet is, Jake shows her the letter he took and asks who Baron is. Jake also says he needs to know if it has anything to do with Abe's death. Miss Peregrine looks shocked to hear this, and as she asks why he thinks someone killed Abe, Jake then says it's because someone broke into the house and took his grandfather's eyes. Despite this, Miss Peregrine doesn't tell him anything, and as he sounds disappointed, Enoch offers to take him to get answers. Olive doesn't think it's a good idea because Enoch only wants to scare Jake, but he doesn't seem to care. Enoch then takes Jake to meet one of the older kids named Victor, who got his eyes ripped out after he was killed by a monster. Enoch turns the boy into a puppet, and this gets Jake scared, so he runs out immediately. Much later, while the kids are having their daily walk with Miss Peregrine, Jake asks Emma about Victor's killer and if it was one of the men with white eyes. Emma asks how he knows about them, and Jake says he saw one of them on the night Abe was killed. She then suggests taking him to her secret spot to check some pictures. Her secret spot turns out to be an abandoned ship at the bottom of the ocean, and when they get there, she clears out all the water in one of the cabins. She then brings out a box, which Abe told her to keep safe for him. As Jake checks inside the box and finds several pictures, he sees one with the man he saw before Abe was killed. Emma then says that the man is Baron, and he's the leader of a rogue group of peculiars. She also mentions that Abe was always hunting down the group until he retired. As Jake looks confused, Emma then tells him that he's also a peculiar. He doesn't believe this, but she says she'll show him his peculiarity. Just then, they head to a hill where they watch Miss Peregrine preparing to kill a monster. However, it turns out that she can't actually see the monster, and only Jake can see it. Emma then tells him that the monster is Victor's killer, and since it appears every day, Miss Peregrine gets to kill it because she already knows where it comes from. Emma also mentions that Jake is special because all peculiars can't see the monster, like him and Abe. With Jake now aware of his peculiarity, Miss Peregrine decides to tell him everything he needs to know. She then narrates how a man named Baron and his group of bad peculiars tried to use a Imbrine for an experiment to become immortal. Unfortunately, the experiment didn't work, and it turned them into invisible monsters called Hollows. After years of research, Baron and his people then discover that by eating the eyes of peculiars, they could slowly regain their old form back. Shortly after, Miss Avocet finally recovers and warns Miss Peregrine that Baron and his people have found her loop in Blackpool and they could be headed for Cairnholm too. She also mentions that they're planning to do their experiment again with more Imbrines in the cellars of the Blackpool Tower. Before they're attacked, Miss Peregrine tells the kids that they need to leave their loop and look for a new home. This also means Jake will have to return to 2016, but Emma wants him to stay. However, he says he can't do that because he has a family. As he returns to the island, Frank is already worried about him because someone has just been killed. Jake then sees that the victim's eyes are missing, and he believes Baron might be around already. He runs away immediately to warn Miss Peregrine, but John follows him. While inside the cave, John first transforms into Dr. Golan before finally revealing his true self as Baron, who says he had to pose as Jake's therapist so he could get information about the loop. He also mentions that it's what he wanted to get from Abe before he was killed by a hollow. Before Jake can do anything, Baron threatens to kill him if he doesn't give up the location of the peculiars. With this, Jake leads him there, and Miss Peregrine immediately looks shocked to see Baron. As he then threatens to kill Jake, she says she'll surrender herself because she knows he needs her for the experiment. Meanwhile, Miss Avocet has stayed hidden in a nearby room, and since Miss Peregrine knows she's around, she tells the kids to go there. Enoch doesn't think the sacrifice is worth it, but Miss Peregrine says that if Baron already found them, there could be hollows already in the loop too. As the kids finally enter the room, Miss Peregrine tells Jake to promise to take care of them, and he says he will. She then transforms into a bird and lets Baron take her, while hoping it also lures any hollow in the loop away. As Miss Avocet is then instructing the kids on how to stay safe, a hollow breaks into the house and kills her. Since Jake is the only one who can see the hollow, he leads everyone out of the house because it's almost time for the loop to reset. Because Miss Peregrine is not around to do it, the bomb drops on the house and kills the hollow. The kids then head to the beach, only to see that Baron is far gone. Emma then suggests going after him with her secret ship. After she then brings it to the surface and gets everyone on board, they start the journey to Blackpool. On the way, Emma tells Jake that going through Miss Avocet's loop is a good opportunity for him because it's in 2016. As she also mentions that the loop is way before Abe gets killed, Emma adds that Jake will get to meet his grandfather again. Despite this, Jake looks worried because he'd have to leave the peculiars, but Emma tells him that they'll be fine on their own. Shortly after, he meets with the others and informs them of his plan to save Miss Peregrine and the other Imbrins who are to be used for Baron's experiment. A while later, they arrive in Blackpool and go through the loop. There, Jake, Emma, and Millard head to the Blackpool Tower to find Baron. As they sneak in, they see him talking to two of his colleagues who are waiting for their other group members before they begin the experiment. Just then, Jake helps Emma float so she can pass a message to Baron to bring all the captured Imbrines outside or face the consequences. As she and Jake leave, Baron sounds pissed and decides to send some hollows after them. One of his colleagues thinks it might be a trap, but Baron says it doesn't matter because the hollows can still kill the kids. He then sends the hollows outside, but Jake has already devised a plan to make the monsters visible. It works out well, and the peculiar kids are then able to take down the monsters with the help of Enoch's puppets and their individual abilities. Shortly after, they return to the building to attack Baron. Despite their efforts, they don't seem to be a match for Baron, who decides to begin the experiment. Before he can go into the cellar, Emma stops him so that Jake can quickly free the Imbrines. Unfortunately, she can't hold him for too long, but when he escapes, Jake has already freed the Imbrines, who attack Baron as they fly out. Jake then tells Baron to surrender since he has lost everything. However, he gets angry and decides to kill Jake. Before he does so, Emma and Enoch break in, only to see two Jakes in the room because Baron has quickly changed his form. As Emma and Enoch look confused as they wonder who the real one is, Jake sees a hollow entering the room. He stays silent and watches as the hollow goes behind Baron and kills him, as he laments that he's not Jake. Before the hollow then goes any further, Jake kills it. Shortly after, Emma says they have to leave before the loop closes. As he says his goodbyes to them, Emma tells him not to worry about them because he has already made them brave enough to keep themselves safe. She then leaves the loop with the others. Following this, Jake immediately heads for Abe's house to meet his grandfather, who looks happy to see him. After Jake then tells Abe everything that happened and how he wished he could follow the peculiar kids, his grandfather gives him a birthday present, which happens to be a book with some money inside. Jake asks what it's for, and Abe tells him that he can still find the Peculiars before it's too late. With the help of a map showing him several loops around the world, Jake embarks on a journey that sees him eventually meet the Peculiars before they leave Blackpool in 1943. Emma looks happy to see him, and Miss Peregrine also looks delighted as she watches all the kids from a tower. Shortly after, she then turns into a bird and flies toward them so they can find a new home together.